We're gonna get into some ball, man, into some hoop, man. And this is a video by a YouTuber. His name is Khalil's Court. And it's called "When Did Your Favorite Players Officially Become Washed Up?" We all have our favorite players in the NBA growing up, man. And sometimes they just be man. They just end up being man. Like, no disrespect, Russ. Russ isn't the same as he used to be. James Harden is not the same as he used to be. Sometimes these players, they're still good, but they're just not as good as you want them to be. Like Paul George, injuries, they're racking up. But let's see this video about the official times, I guess, when they come back. Because we all know that KG meme of him Brooklyn Nets. That's just crazy. But let's get into it, man.
Despite what you hear from the media, the NBA seems to be in a great place at the moment.
With superstars like Giannis, Jokic, Luka, SGA, and others all in their prime, as well as a surplus of young talent around the league, it's going to be awesome watching these new faces of basketball build their legacies in real time. But as a fan who grew up watching the stars of the late 2000s and 2010s, it's definitely weird seeing some of the icons of my childhood fade into obscurity. It feels like it happened out of nowhere, but the vast majority of the stars from when we were kids are either in the twilight of their careers or completely out of the league at this point.
Today, we're going to take a look back at the last decade or so and pinpoint exactly when all of our favorite players officially became washed up.
Okay.
Starting with 2014, we saw two all-time greats this season fall from grace. Starting with Kobe Bryant, he infamously came back from an Achilles tear in just 8 months. However, this injury quite simply zapped him of any gas he had left in the tank, as he looked like a completely different player compared to 2013, losing all the agility and burst that he previously had. He played in just 6 games this season before being shut down for another season-ending injury, and remained banged up and inefficient until he ultimately retired in 2016. As for Kevin Garnett, he was already...
Bro, the KG memes are the craziest memes ever, bro. Like, Brooklyn Nets KG was bad, bro, but like, y'all's crazy, bro.
Pretty slowly declining after suffering a knee injury in 2009, but 2014 was the year that he officially became washed. After getting traded to the Nets, KG posted career lows in minutes, points, blocks, and field goal percentage. His inability to live up to expectations after Brooklyn pulled off the blockbuster move to bring him and Paul Pierce in was a big reason why the super team was such a big failure. He played 2 more seasons as a role player before retiring in 2016 alongside Kobe.
That was a really
Both of the players from this season should not have fallen off as quickly as they did. 2015 was the year that most people have...
Everybody knows, man. Everybody knows, man. If you grew up in the 2010s, man. Everybody loved D Rose, bro. If you got women, if you got a man, ask your man how they feel about prime D Rose. They gonna cry right there. They gonna be on their hands and knees crying, reminiscing on D Rose, man. Now he retired, man. He got dreads now. He don't even got the low cut no more. He could have been the GOAT.
Officially lost any hope of Derrick Rose reaching the MVP levels he was at in the past.
Yeah.
After tearing his ACL at the end of the 2012 season, he ended up missing all of 2013. Before tearing his meniscus just 10 games into his return in 2014. By the time he finally came back full-time in 2015, it was clear that the many non-contact injuries quickly piled up on him, as he was no longer leaps and bounds ahead of the league in terms of athleticism. Heading into the season, fans expected him to come back and be the same guy he was in 2012, but this actually marked the end of his prime. He had some solid years down the line after he developed more skill, but it wasn't nearly enough to get back to where he once was in 2011. And Dwight Howard suffered a similar fate to D Rose, as the injuries quite simply became too much to handle. We all know about the many back issues that he had towards the end of his tenure in Orlando, and his lone season in Los Angeles, but it was actually a knee injury with the Rockets in 2015 that was a nail in the coffin for him. He missed 41 games during this year with something called knee edema. During the time he was out, Houston was able to elevate their offense. They were no longer feeding him inefficient post touches. When he eventually came back, he was no longer a focal point for the team. From this point forward, Dwight spent 1 more year putting up mediocre stats with the Rockets before he bounced around the league for the rest of his career and ultimately fizzling out. 2015 was the first time since 2007 where he failed to make the All-Star team. And since he would never make another one again in his career, it's pretty obvious that this was the year he became washed.
Yeah. I do it.
In 2016, we saw 2 legends swiftly fall from grace.
Yeah.
Starting with Paul Pierce, his All-Star days ended once he went to the Nets, just like Kevin Garnett. However, he was still a decent starting caliber small forward. After his lone year in Brooklyn, he spent 2015 in Washington, where he had one of the craziest
I
playoff
call
runs I've ever
game.
seen in terms of clutch shot making.
I call
As it
game.
truly felt like everything he threw up during crunch time just ended up falling. Following this insane stretch,
crazy shot.
Pierce signed with the Clippers to go home and play for his hometown, as well as rejoin his old coach, Doc Rivers.
Yeah, I remember that.
Once he got
He
there,
didn't get
though,
no PT.
his numbers fell across the board, as it was clear
None.
he could no longer be a true contributor for an NBA team. And there wasn't any major moment or injury that happened. He quite simply just got old. He was still able to produce in a big way well into
for
his
real.
mid-30s because his game didn't really rely on athleticism.
He was just
But everybody
shooting.
isn't LeBron, and his time just expired once he got to the Clippers. Tim Duncan's decline, on the other hand, was much more sudden and suspicious. He was a key contributor on San Antonio's championship team in 2014, and then more than held his own against the best front court in the league when the Spurs played the Clippers in the
His face
2015
breaks up.
playoffs. However, once 2016 rolled around, he kind of just lost it. With LaMarcus Aldridge joining the team this season, everyone knew that Tim was going to take a back seat, in the regular season at least. But it was expected that once the playoffs rolled around, he was going to be ready to be leaned on, since he wasn't gassed out from the regular season.
Yeah.
This plan failed to materialize, though, as he put up just 6 points and 5 rebounds a game, and most
Damn.
notably shot 35% from the field in the conference semis,
He was-
where his Spurs were eliminated by the OKC Thunder. When trying to diagnose the issue, I saw that his knee was really giving him trouble throughout 2016.
Oh, really?
So I think I'll attribute it to
That makes
this,
sense.
as well as the fact that his 39-year-old body just couldn't withstand the grind of an NBA
Yeah.
season anymore.
That boy Tim knee was fucked up that whole time, man. He was ready to go home.
Only one legend fell off in 2017,
Ah,
and that was
Dirk.
Dirk Nowitzki. Despite being 38 years old this season, the Mavericks were still looking
Sneak-
to
sneak
compete
it.
with a roster centered around their sharpshooting big man, as they signed Harrison Barnes in the offseason to help give them some additional scoring punch.
It did
They
not
did
help.
sneak into the playoffs
Not
the
that
season
much.
prior, so it was logical to expect them to try and get
Harrison
whatever they
Barnes
could
was
out
a
of Dirk in
bucket,
these final years.
Hey!
But right off the bat, it was clear that his days in the NBA were numbered. He missed 19 out of the first 24 games this season with Achilles issues. So much so, that he was quoted saying any type of basketball movement would lead to instant pain in the area.
Damn.
And you could tell this statement was true just by watching the way he was moving after he came
Yeah.
back. It was honestly tough to watch. That pain became really noticeable in 2017, as he put up his worst scoring numbers since his rookie year. Even though he hung around for a couple of more seasons, 2017 was the point where everyone noticed that the Mavs needed to go into a rebuild, since the window on Dirk's prime was clearly closed at this point.
I love Dirk though, man. Dirk was such a
2018 might be the
bro.
most notable year on this whole list. Starting with
really?
Dwayne Wade, you can argue that he began to fall off during his lone season in Chicago the season prior,
Really?
as he failed to make the All-Star team for the first time since his rookie season. However, he still put up decent numbers,
He was hooping
scoring
low-key
about
in
18 a night on a
Chicago.
playoff team. His future was in limbo with Chicago, until he was suddenly traded right before the 2018 season
Nah,
started
this
to
is
the
the
Cleveland
decline.
Cavaliers. He was infamously slotted into the starting lineup, taking longtime starter J.R. Smith's spot. The magnifying glass was right on him, as many critics didn't think he deserved to play over JR without proving anything first. And he did nothing but prove the critics right. He was downright horrible in Cleveland, putting up just 11 points per game. Things were so bad in Cleveland that he was traded back to Miami for just a second round pick in return, which basically said that the Cavs just wanted to get rid of him.
Not for
When he
real.
was back in Miami, he would come off the bench for another year and a half before retiring in 2019. Wade himself said that he knew it was time to retire once he started playing in Cleveland, as he just couldn't produce the way he used to, and was mentally checked out at that point. Elsewhere,
wild, bro.
Carmelo Anthony finally got out of New
P.
York
Cudi
as he
Melo.
was traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder about a month before the season started. He was still an all-star, averaging well over 20 points a game for the Knicks. However, New York was pretty horrible during this time, so it had been about 4 seasons since we truly saw him play some meaningful basketball. Since he was north of 30 and joining Russell Westbrook and Paul George, both of whom were still in their prime, it was expected that Melo was going to be the one who had to sacrifice the most if the team wanted to win. But he must have seen things differently, as he infamously laughed off the possibility of coming off the bench during media day.
He did not
or
care
even
at all.
coming
Man.
off the bench. And the second question is,
Who, me?
Who, me? Off the bench?
Hey, P, they said I gotta come off the bench.
Off the bench? Why would I do that?
At the time, it didn't seem that crazy because he still had the reputation
Melo
of
was
being a
funny,
superstar.
bro.
However, this
Should've
reputation
came off that
quickly
bench.
flipped as he completely flamed out in OKC. His numbers took sharp declines across the board, was horrible on defense, and most notably had trouble taking a lesser role. So not only did he prove that he can no longer be a first or second option on a contending team, he also showed that he didn't have the right attitude to become a role player.
Bro did not wanna win
Basically,
for real, bro, I
everyone
swear.
in the NBA knew that Carmelo was washed up, besides Carmelo himself.
Not for real.
And this ended up causing him to get exiled from the league for a brief period in 2020. And to wrap up 2018, we have maybe the saddest entry on this list, Isaiah Thomas.
Man, this
IT
was so
broke out
messed
as a
up.
superstar in 2017, averaging almost 30 points a night to lead the Celtics to the 1 seed in the East. But during their playoff run to the conference finals, he played through a hip injury that the team told him wouldn't have any long-term impact on his career. After that, he was traded to the Cavs for Kyrie Irving. As crazy as it seems now, there were questions about who won this trade at the time, because people really thought that Thomas was at the very least on the same level as Irving.
People thought IT and Kyrie were on the same level at that season, bro. That shit was crazy.
However, once he suited up for Cleveland, it was clear he wasn't the same player that he used to be. Similar to how elite running backs in the NFL of a short prime, IT suffered one major injury that immediately ended his brief peak, as he never got anywhere close back to the 2017 level of production, despite the many tweets from him claiming he could still do it if given the opportunity.
That was a wild time, because I really did think like D Wade and LeBron were gonna get the gang back together, and that did not work out. They had D Rose, IT, D Wade. Like I thought this. I'm like, these like all of like LeBron's ops could together. We gonna hoop now, and then it did not work. It did not work. And then Hoodie Melo didn't want to play team ball, and then Isaiah Thomas hip. That messed up, man. It was a sad time. It was a sad time, 2018, man. But hey, it was good.
2019 saw the first of two premier big men of the 2010s suffer major injuries in consecutive years that cut their prime short. When DeMarcus Cousins signed a one-year deal with the Warriors in the 2018 offseason, the basketball community collectively freaked out. Even though he was coming off of a torn Achilles, most people thought that there was no better place for him to ease himself back into game shape, while simultaneously fitting the lone hole in the Warriors lineup at center. While his numbers were unsurprisingly down upon his return, Golden State still went 23-7 with him in the lineup. Many hoped that he would eventually get back to his old ways in the playoffs, but he ended up tearing his quad in Game 2 of their first-round series against the Clippers. He somehow made it back for the finals in June, but was clearly not the same player he used to be. After this, he ended up tearing his ACL in the offseason and missed all of 2020.
Damn.
From there, he bounced around the league as a backup for a couple of years, before falling out of the NBA entirely. Moving on to 2020, Blake Griffin's career resurgence in Detroit came to an end just as quickly as it began. The Pistons had a very successful year in 2019.
Bro, I ain't gonna lie, Blake was getting a bucket in Detroit, man. I ain't gonna lie, if his body didn't if he didn't get hurt, he probably had a couple more years of him getting a bucket. I ain't gonna lie, man. He was shooting lights out too.
Since 2009, where they made it to the playoffs. The biggest reason why was Blake Griffin, who had arguably the best season of his career, putting up 24.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists.
Younger Blake Duncan that holder, I ain't gonna lie.
But unfortunately, he ended up tearing his meniscus towards the end of the regular season. Like Isaiah Thomas, he decided to play on it in the playoffs, suiting up for games 3 and 4 of their first-round series against the Bucks, where they eventually got swept. While he said the decision to play didn't impact his knee in any way, he came back in 2020 and played in just 18 games before being shut down for another procedure on the same knee. From this point on, he was quite simply no longer a superstar, or even a starting caliber player, as he ended up taking on a bench role until ultimately retiring in 2023.
Still didn't get that ring, man.
Moving over to the point guard position, we lost two of the most electrifying guards in recent memory in 2021.
Yeah.
Starting with Kemba Walker, I went a bit deeper into this during my video about the 2021 Celtics, but here's a brief summary. The team needed him more than ever due to the departure of Gordon Hayward, but both his numbers and games played were not anywhere close to the franchise cornerstone he was supposed to be. And this was because his knees were quite simply shot at this point. After this disastrous 2021 campaign, he was shipped out to OKC, who immediately waived him. Next was a pair of unsuccessful stints in New York and Dallas, which led to him being out of the league by 2023. For John Wall, it took us multiple years to see his actual decline. His 2019 season was pretty similar to his typical numbers in terms of production, but he appeared in just 32 games due to a heel injury. While rehabbing said injury, he ended up tearing his Achilles, which led to him missing all of the 2020 season as well. By the time he came back for 2021, the Wizards moved him to the Rockets in exchange for Russell Westbrook. Houston was just beginning a full rebuild at this time, which gave him plenty of opportunities to prove he was still a top point guard in the league. However, the large sample size shows that his best days were clearly behind him, as he put up extremely unimpressive numbers during his stint in Houston. The Clippers would then take a flyer on him to start the 2023 season to see if he could still be productive in a lesser role, but he unfortunately wasn't able to do that either. After showing he couldn't be the focal point or a supporting piece on a team, Wall was out of the league after 2023 just like Kemba.
Which is crazy because, man, like, if you remember Prime Wall, he was open, man. It sucks to see like these players fall off a
Russell Westbrook to go from 2022 numbers to people questioning if he should just flat out retire. After a slow start with his new team in 2021, Russ went on an absolute tear
After
to
the
close out
Wizards,
the
he
season,
kind of
dragging the Wizards to the playoffs while averaging a triple-double for the 4th time in 5 seasons.
Crazy.
This was enough to convince the Lakers to break up their championship core and put together a blockbuster deal to bring in Russ to play alongside LeBron and AD. On paper, this big three looked amazing, but there were immediately questions regarding how well they would mesh together on the floor. And unfortunately, it was pretty awful. Westbrook really struggled adjusting to his new role as the third option, and put up his worst numbers in over 10 years. Since this 2022 disaster, he's come to terms with the reality that he's a role player now, and has found a nice spot with the Nuggets. But if there was ever a clear indication that someone had become washed, it was 2022 Russ. Moving on to someone whose falloff wasn't as direct, Chris Paul is a fascinating player to look at under this lens, mostly because he had a late career renaissance in his mid-30s. After playing a supporting role behind James Harden in Houston, most thought that CP3's All-Star days were behind him, especially after a really bad 2019 season for his standards. But right when everyone thought his NBA career would go to die in OKC, he caught a second wind, somehow leading that young Thunder team to the playoffs.
Which
From
is crazy,
there,
because I did not
he was
expect
traded to
him to do
Phoenix,
that,
where he immediately took them to the finals and almost won. But we were able to see the wheels begin to fall off during the 2022 playoffs, where the point guard infamously fell off a cliff after his 37th birthday.
Damn.
His drop-off was a major reason why Phoenix blew a 2.
Nah, that's crazy. He went 23-10 in the playoffs, and as soon as he turned 37, 9-6. Damn.
Will lead to the Mavs in the conference semis, and is what ultimately
At
led to one of the
37,
greatest moves
different,
in NBA history. CP3 flamed out in the playoffs once again in 2023, which led to him being shipped off by the Suns to officially mark the end of his days as a franchise player.
Great.
When most people think about Klay Thompson, they often point to his injuries in 2019 and 20 that marked the end of his prime. And you can definitely make an argument that his peak ended the night he tore his ACL in the 2019 finals.
Yeah.
But he was still a productive player for the Warriors after his long-awaited return a couple years later. He had some massive games as a starter for them in the 2022 championship run, and then averaged north of 20 points per game on over 40% from 3 in 2023. However, his age and injury seemed to finally catch up to him last year in 2024. Heading into his contract year, Klay was eager to show both the Warriors and other potential teams that he was deserving of a massive payday. With this in mind, his shot selection just went out the window, which really hurt Golden State's offense. Klay's poor decision-making was so damaging that it led to him getting benched for a period of time. Golden State finished as the 10 seed in 2024, putting them in the play-in tournament where they faced an elimination game to save their season. In that said game, Klay put up a donut on 0 of 10 shooting in what turned out to be his final game in Golden State, which really indicated that he was truly washed up at this point.
That's wild.
Now that we're approaching the home stretch of the 2025 season, it's clear that the one major star who has fallen off a cliff is Paul George. When PG signed his massive $200 million extension with the Sixers this past offseason, all that Sixers fans wanted from him was to be better than Tobias Harris. But that's pretty much the exact player he's become. But he's honestly turned into an injury-prone Tobias Harris at this point in his career. Of course, you can point to the fact that Philly's had crazy lineups all year due to a plethora of injuries, including multiple that George has had to deal with himself. But with the injuries to Maxey and Embiid, you would think that his counting numbers would at least be elevated or on par with what they used to be. With lower averages and poorer efficiency, it's looking like PG's days as a star player are behind him. And now that we're officially caught up to today, I want to hear what you guys think. Which player's fall off was most noticeable to you? And who do you think will be next to regress in the coming years? Let me know in the comments down below, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Hey, shout out to Khalil's Court. That's a good video, man. But yeah, man, it really sucks seeing the guys we grew up to like just not being able to produce as they good as hand. Like everybody's not LeBron. Like LeBron is literally the anomaly. LeBron's still hooping like he's 20 still. It's insane. But who's next? We're probably gonna fall. It's probably gonna be KD most likely. But which probably not, because like he tore his Achilles and still gets a buck. So it don't even matter. But yeah, that's a great vid, man. Shout out to Khalil's Court, man. He got a lot of subscribers too. He needs some more too. Just like me, I need some more too.